have here is the new Ford Mustang. It looks ready for the 21st century with its modern fascia and tighter lines. But what's more interesting than the design is that, for the first time in 30 years, this one's turbocharged, and it's a 4-cylinder. Before you call that blasphemy, consider that this EcoBoost makes 10 horsepower and 40 pound-feet more than the V6, and it weighs quite a bit less than the GT.
The Mustang EcoBoost certainly isn't the most powerful Mustang in the lineup, but it might be the most interesting. Why? Well, it's because of what's under here. That's a turbocharged 2.3-liter inline-4. Now that displacement is coincidentally the same as the turbo SVO from 84-85, although this engine shares nothing with that engine. It is just an interesting coincidence. Now, when you don't have a V6 or a V8, although those engines are optional, you have a lot of space in the engine bay, and so this 4-cylinder makes up for that space by adding a turbo. Starting with the bottom end, it's built. You have forged crankshaft, forged connecting rods, you have oil squirting piston cooling jets, you've got direct injection, so there's delivering quite a bit of fuel to the engine as well. The turbocharger is a twin scroll unit. Now that means each exhaust port is essentially delivering 2 pulses. There's going to be a low RPM side and a high RPM side, roughly. And that's what's going to help this engine get to boost quick and help reduce lag or eliminate it completely. We'll find out how effective the system is on the dyno. We have some good news and some not particularly good news standing underneath this particular Mustang. The not so great news is that we have the 6-speed automatic transmission instead of the 6-speed manual. It's not the end of the world, this automatic's fine, but I would have loved to have driven this car with a manual transmission. Anyway, the good news, this car has a performance package that adds a bunch of different upgrades to the chassis to help it go faster, stop better, turn better, and on and on. Starting with the tires and wheels. The wheels are 19 by 9 inches at all 4 corners. The tires are 255/40 Pirelli P0s. We have upgraded brakes at all 4 corners too. On the front, they're 13.9-inch rotors with 4 piston calipers. There's single piston calipers in the back. Speaking of the back, heading back there, the exhaust pipe is actually a pretty good diameter coming down to the cat, although it does shrink up considerably the further back we go. We also have one exhaust pipe that splits into 2 because, I don't know, reasons. It seems to me like you're just adding weight for styling. I'd much rather have just one exhaust pipe and save whatever weight you added by doing that. Further back, we have a 355 rear end and the big story, which is what Ford has been flirting around with for a long time now, an independent rear suspension. Finally, Ford has embraced modern suspension technology and thrown away the solid rear axle in favor of some actual sophistication. And whatever we lose on the drag strip by losing the solid rear axle, we should more than make up with vehicle handling. I can't wait to see how this thing drives.
While we recorded peaks of 279 horsepower and 295 pound-feet of torque, we were happy to see that torque stayed above 290 for 4 out of the 5 runs, varying around 3 pound-feet. Look at the shape of the power curve, how quickly torque increases, and how the curve falls at 5,300 RPM. That means the engine should feel great in the low and mid-range, giving tons of torque, but might feel soft when you rev it out. Surprised by the lack of high RPM grunt? You shouldn't be. Look at a powered torque graph of the Focus or Fiesta ST, and you'll see a very similar shape, though at lower numbers. Clearly, this engine was developed with a similar mindset, and, well, we love that Fiesta. With stability control off in the car and track mode, a launch involved holding both pedals, waiting for boost to surge and releasing the brake. It's an amusing process. Through the quarter at 14.1 seconds and 97.8 miles an hour, the EcoBoost falls right between the best times we've recorded from the Hyundai Genesis Coupe and the Volkswagen GTI. Its 25.5 second figure-8 lap matches that of the Subaru WRX and Genesis Coupe, as does its 0.96 average lateral G. It also falls right around the last-gen automatic Mustang V6 Performance Pack in all tests.
The Mustang EcoBoost is one of the cars I've been most interested in driving this year because it's a turbo 4-cylinder Mustang, and we haven't had that since around the time I was born. So how is it? Well, it's interesting because if you're expecting this to be a replacement for the V8 or a competitive alternative, it's not in terms of power delivery and fun factor, but it is a significant upgrade over the V6. The steering I actually like quite a bit in precision and a little bit in weighting too. You turn the wheel, the car goes, and there's not a lot of fuss, not a lot of fake stuff happening in between that process. It feels natural and tied down. The motor is all low RPM. It's all mid-range, as we found on the dyno, and that's something you really notice when you push this car. When you start trying to wring out every last RPM, you find out that as the power band gets above 5,500 RPM, it gets louder, but you're not necessarily going faster. And short shifting, that works. That's something you have to do in a lot of these mid-range engines. Although it's not, revving out engines is a lot more fun, let's face it. I think my excitement with this car comes from the fact that I remember what the base V6 Mustang was like. Even the V6 Premium that they started recently and the performance packages that they threw on that. It was a better step, but this is such a better car than that car was. Now, the problems, there aren't many. I think the biggest issue that's facing this car is weight. This thing is just over 3,600 pounds. And when you have 310 horsepower, that's what Ford's claim is, that's a power to weight ratio in the 11s, which isn't that great. This thing may have a higher specific power output than most of the $30,000 sporty cars, but that weight's really gonna hold it back when it comes down to performance. I think what we have here isn't so much the second coming of the turbo performance Mustang, but a much better, realistic Mustang for most people to drive around every day. I quite like this car tootling around town, driving on the freeway. The low RPM torque feels great. It still looks cool. All the features are nice and easy to use. The steering is nice, and around off ramps and on ramps that have constant changing radii and all that stuff, it's really fun. You start really pushing it like I'm trying to avoid here, you start seeing the seams, but again, I think that's okay.
Streets of Willow and the Mustang EcoBoost. Got a little 2.3 liter 4 with a turbo on it, and it works. The body structure is one of the areas where the Mustang is way better than it was last year. I could feel it. I can feel it on the road, and I feel it here on the track. Very strong body structure. It gives the suspension something better to hang on to. All right, this pony and this cowboy are all warmed up. It's time to turn the clocks on, see what kind of time we can run. with a little EcoBoost turbo 4-cylinder here at Willow Springs.
It may not be the performance-oriented version we had hoped, but the EcoBoost makes a very pleasant non-V8 entrant into the Mustang lineup. Matching performance and price of similar cars, provided you option it reasonably. It's by no means a replacement for that V8, but nor is it the penalty box the V6 used to be. It's better than that car in every way. Plus, its higher fuel economy rating and strong low RPM power delivery make the compelling choice as a fun, sporty daily driver.
You just have to have whip sound effects.
Cyrus don't even need to add sound effects.
Good? 3? No. That's hot.